Hello, and welcome to Running on Carbs podcast. I am your host and your coach, Coach Val, and I'd like to welcome you to episode number 19 of the podcast today. Today is another special episode, and we are celebrating again. If you were with us last week, it was my birthday week, and this week it is my Veganniversary week. So, a Veganniversary is the date or the month, depending on whether you know, that you went vegan and you changed from an omnivore diet to a plant based or vegan diet. And for me, this is my 7-year veganiversary. And I am really excited about it because when you first start off, you don't know what to expect. When you first make a decision to change up the entire way that you eat, which basically changes the entire way that you live. And all of this is a little scary in the beginning, if I am truly honest. You don't know what to expect. You don't know the changes that will happen. You have hope because usually you don't make a change like that without an expectation of hope and a purpose and a reason for uprooting your life in that manner. So I certainly had my reasons, and you're welcome to go back to the very first episode of this podcast when I talk about why I went plant based and my story. I'm not going to go into all of that again here, but I will give a little background, and then I'm going to give some things that I've learned along the way about being vegan, being plant based, and I will explain the difference as well, because I know that's a big question for a lot of people who are not vegan or who are new to the lifestyle. But I'll just give a little background and just share some tips that I've learned along the way that can help you, hopefully. So I went plant based in 2017. And the way that I went plant based was, well, backing up just a smidge, I had been trying to lower my cholesterol levels for over a year, probably. And I was told diet and exercise were the ways to do it. I was very insistent that I did not want to go on any medicines or statins. I didn't think that the cholesterol levels, and neither did my doctor, believed that the cholesterol levels were high enough to warrant that. But based on my age and my activity level, it was concerning because my cholesterol levels were higher than you would anticipate for someone with my active lifestyle. And so it was determined it's likely due to genetic causes. And that would make a lot of sense based on my family history. So I decided I was going to lower it using diet and exercise. So I cut out all red meat at the time, and it wasn't hard. Um, and I actually did have a little bit of red meat here and there. Like we would go out to dinner, I would have something then, but I was losing my flavor for it. I was losing my taste for it anyway. And it, I didn't really like it very much. So I cut out red meat, and that was not hard to do. I still kept cheese and I still kept other dairy products and fish. So that would have made me, I guess that would make me a lacto ovo vegetarian, pescatarian. I don't know. Maybe there's not a name for that one. So anyway, I had fish and dairy and eggs. So, but pretty much everything else I had cut out. Very little chicken, things like that. So anyway, it didn't work. Long story short, it didn't work. Cholesterol levels continued to rise. They started bouncing around. And we started doing tests every 6 months rather than 12 months, and it just wasn't working. Again, I don't want statins, so I said, okay, I gotta try something else, and so I cut out chicken. More things, so cut that out. So I was only doing fish, and of course the dairy. And it never seemed to help. So I was sitting on the couch on August 1st. It was only a couple of days after my birthday, and watching Netflix. And at the time, there was a documentary, very popular still, called What the Health, that was on Netflix. And I didn't know what it was, but I just turned it on. So I was watching this show, and I was blown away by what I was seeing on this documentary. And there's a lot of controversy around this documentary, even then and now. And it's interesting how veganism in and of itself has a lot of controversy surrounding it, in conversational circles and dietary circles and medical circles. I mean, just there's a lot of controversy surrounding it. And I don't know if it's because I've contemplated this a little bit. So I think partly there's a lot of controversy surrounding it because it goes against the status quo. And anything that goes against the status quo is going to be controversial. Whether it's good for you or not, it's going to have controversy because people don't want to let go of the things that they've always had. It tests and pushes boundaries for people's traditions, for things that they enjoy and that they like and that they don't want to let go of. And I mean, those are understandable human responses. So I get that. But I'm just looking at this from an outsider's observational perspective, as I'm talking about this, not for opinions or anything of that nature, but just purely observational. So, anyway, watching the show, very controversial. I didn't know it at the time, though. It was just very fascinating to me to see what happens in the food industry. I had no idea. I mean, I've seen so many things since then that now it seems like second nature. But to anybody coming to this information new, it's mind blowing. Like, watching to see what happens in animal agriculture. I had no idea what happens in the packaged food industry. And for instance, the similarities between the smoking campaigns in the 50s compared to the sugar campaigns and processed food of today. I mean, it's fascinating if you even just look at it from a psychological perspective. um, so my eyes were open, but what really opened my eyes was that during this time, I had switched to tilapia fish, in order to help lower my cholesterol because I thought it was better for me than red meat. And as I'm watching the show, the announcer, the narrator comes on and says that tilapia has as much cholesterol as a pork chop. And I was like, what? Since when? Wait a minute. So I paused the show and I got up and I went to my freezer, opened the freezer, pulled out the bag, looked at the cholesterol on the bag for this fish that I had from Costco. And I can't remember the number on there for the cholesterol now, but I was shocked. I remember the feeling. I remember the emotion of looking at it and saying, well, how is that supposed to help me lower my cholesterol if every single day, sometimes twice a day, I'm eating more cholesterol and adding it to my body? My body obviously makes plenty. I don't need to add more. So that was it. That was my turning point. That was my moment. That was August 1st, 2017. I still had a bunch of food in my refrigerator and my freezer. The fish, I don't know what I eventually did to that. But I remember I had this big old thing of Parmesan cheese that, again, I got at Costco. So it's a massive bag. And I told myself, okay, I'm not going to do the cholesterol anymore. No more cholesterol, no more animal products, but I'll finish up the cheese because it's just quote unquote Parmesan cheese. So it's not a big deal. And I used to just use a small amount. I would put it on my vegetables that I would steam, and then I'd put the Parmesan cheese on there. It was like the grated fresh kind, not the grated canned kind. So, I spent a pretty penny on that cheese. And so anyway, I started using some of it, but I started using less and less of it and realized after a while, like after several weeks, that I wasn't gonna eat it. I wasn't gonna get through it, and I might as well just go cold turkey because having one foot in and one foot out of a plant-based diet was too difficult. I couldn't sustain it, and it actually made being around non, plant-based foods harder when I was sort of in or and out. I wasn't fully committed yet, and that actually was harder for me than just fully committing. So, I decided to just fully commit to the plant-based diet, and I got rid of everything that wasn't plant-based, so any animal products that my husband wasn't eating. I mean, I didn't throw out his food. I realized that I was making this decision for me and my health, but that he's a grown man and he's an adult and he can make his own decisions based on, his decisions for his health and his life. And as much as I would like to make all the other people's decisions for them, I realized that that's not reasonable, and that's just a way to be, to get in fights. So I don't make decisions for other people. I still don't make decisions for other people. My clients, my family, everybody gets to make their own decisions, but I also expect that they will respect my decisions. So there's a mutual respect there, at least that I expect to happen. So what I learned quickly, so here's my first lesson. What I learned quickly is that um, cutting out all those animal sources, number one. So let me tell you real quick before I go on to my first lesson. Um, my cholesterol levels since going plant based. So that was in 2017. My most recent tests, I am now 100 points less than I was at my highest point. I'm actually a little more than 100 points less than I was then. So even though it's hereditary, even though I have something, genetically in my body that holds on to more cholesterol than I necessarily need, um, my levels have come down 100 points in that time, in those 7 years. So along with my plant-based diet, my active lifestyle, my markers now are so much better when it comes to everything, my blood work and all of that. So I just had all my blood work done. I do it right around the time of my birthday every year, and just got all my results back, and everything looks great. So yay! It all pays off in the end. Um, so anyway, just wanted to share that yes, it does pay off, and it has worked for me. Um, okay, so first lesson that I learned was that going plant-based does not mean you automatically lose weight. And this is partly why I don't do weight loss coaching for clients, because I know that optimal nutrition doesn't necessarily equate to lower scale weight. And it doesn't mean that you won't lose weight. It really depends on where you started from and what your activity level is. And it also really matters about how you balance your meals, your macros. And that is something that I have also learned along the way, is how to balance those macros. Um, you really have to consider, that the sources, because when you listen to a lot of the plant-based doctors talk about eating plant-based and eating a vegan diet, they're really quick to point out that protein is in everything. Well, just about. So what they often say is broccoli has protein. This is true. Broccoli has quite a bit of protein. The amount of broccoli you have to eat to get that protein to support a very active lifestyle and muscle building is probably more broccoli than you're willing to eat. So that means you have to balance it with other foods that have higher amounts of protein in them already. So broccoli's good. I love broccoli, eat it a lot. I also love kale, which also has a lot of protein. Um, but again, not in the quantities that I would need it to support a very active running lifestyle. So, although vegetables do have protein, they may not be the macro balance that you need in order to support your activity level. So that's an important thing that I learned. I also learned that beans, although a very good source of protein, are not necessarily the best source of protein. There are a lot of carbohydrates that are packaged with beans. And that actually kind of leads me to another lesson that I learned, and that is that all the protein sources, when it comes to vegan foods and plant based foods, each one that is high in protein is packaged with something else, with another macro. So, although you might get a lot of protein in one source, you're also going to get carbs. So, or you're going to get fat. So, for example, tofu. Tofu is a great example. Tofu has a lot of protein. It's a great protein source, and I use it often, but it's packaged with fat. Less carbs, but quite a bit of fat. So you have to know that as you're putting together an eating plan and balancing out macros. Beans, as I mentioned, good source of protein, also great for longevity. Lots of great research around beans and legumes, and I encourage them in everyone's diet. In certain moderation, of course, depending on where you're starting. Uh, but you're also going to package it with a lot of carbs, and other foods also have a lot of carbs. And when I say carbs, I'm talking about your natural carbohydrates, not your more complex carbohydrates, not your simple carbohydrates that come from things like packaged foods and cookies and snacks and things like that. I'm not talking about the poor nutritional sources of carbs. I'm talking about your natural whole carbs. So even those, um, too much of it is too much of a good thing. So you still need a balance. And so that's why it's really important when you're starting out. And even now, I mean, I'm not new, but I track my food and my macros on a daily basis. And for me, it's very simple. It's not difficult to do because I oftentimes meal prep. And so I know what I'm going to eat for the whole week, typically, or at least half the week. So if you have a strategy and you have a plan and you're organized about it up front, then it's a lot easier to make sure that you're getting that balance of the macros that you need. And I have found personally for my activity level, it is very easy to get in 100 grams of protein a day. And it is just a smidge extra effort to get in about 125 to 130 grams of protein a day, which leads me to my next lesson. And my next lesson is that when I first started out, because I was listening to all these plant-based doctors and, whole food or whole food plant-based nutrition doctors, and talking heads. I call them all talking heads. And some people are great and some people aren't. I put them all in the same bucket of talking heads. Um, but when I was listening to them, they would say you have to get all your nutrients from whole foods. And although I am still a proponent for whole foods first, I also don't think there's anything wrong with a good high quality protein powder as a supplement. I supplement in a lot of ways. I supplement creatine. I supplement with a multivitamin because it makes me feel good. I supplement with B12. I supplement with an EPA DHA. So I'm not worried about supplements. That's something that I have done for most of my adult life. And a lot of us do. If you've taken a multivitamin or any, supplement vitamin in your lifetime, you have been supplementing. Supplementing means two things. One, it's like insurance. So if you aren't getting everything that you need from your diet, it's kind of like taking an insurance pill. So that's how I see it. So you're taking an insurance pill just to make sure that your body's not missing anything. And I also see it as a way of optimization. So if there's something that can help enhance what I'm doing without harming, of course, then I'm open. to that, at a certain limit. And only in, nothing crazy, and nothing illegal. So we're talking over the counter normal stuff. But I was afraid of protein powder because I thought you have to get your protein from natural food sources or you're quote unquote cheating. And I just realized that's not true. Now, I don't want to take a lot of protein powder because, again, my idea is to supplement my protein, not to get all of my protein from protein powders. But if I want to add a little bit of protein powder to my coffee in the morning and to my chicory tea at night as, my insurance for the day to make sure I'm meeting my levels without getting in a bunch of extra calories or extra carbs or fat that come along with foods, then that is the idea of a supplement. And so that is how I use protein powder. I simply use it to supplement my protein sources, as a bookend of my day, really. And so sometimes I'll skip the protein powder in my evening tea if I've managed to meet my macros during the day, or I can, lessen it and use less of it. So I'm using it in a supplement format, not as a replacement for actual food. And that's been an important lesson that I learned. Um, It's also easy on a plant-based diet to overconsume things that you would think are good for you, like, for instance, the good carbohydrates and fiber. You wouldn't think that you can overconsume fiber. Um, However, I suppose I don't know, I'm talking to a bunch of runners, so then again, you might be afraid of fiber. You don't have to be afraid of fiber. Fiber is a good thing. Fiber is it's good for your body and you need it. But you can overconsume fiber, and you also might want to pay attention to your timing, depending on your body and how quickly fiber acts in your body, in your gut in particular. But too much fiber can have a counterintuitive impact on the gut and the body, and it can cause gas. It can cause bloating, and sometimes that's can be really painful and uncomfortable for the people around you potentially. So you have to be aware of the amount of fiber that you're taking in and that your body can handle it. If you realize that you're getting a lot of that bloating impact and such, you might back off the amount of fiber that you're taking in to see if that helps. Also, increase your water intake to help flush everything through, if you are having some issues. But carbs also are the same way. Carbs can be stored in the body because they're stored in as glucose and glycogen, um, and it can be stored in the liver, and then eventually it gets stored as fat if it's not used. So if you have an overabundance of carbohydrates in your body, you could potentially be storing fat that is unnecessary. And with plant-based foods, you're getting high carbs in all of that. So you want to make sure that you're not over consuming the carbs and that your body is able to use them without storing them as fat. So that can be a bit of trial and error because everybody's body is going to be a little bit different. So you start with your baseline and see how your body feels, and then you start tweaking from there. But it's a process. It's not something that just happens overnight, and it's not something that a coach or nutritionist or even a dietitian can come in and just say, "Oh, here are your numbers based on your, age and weight, etc." They can give you guidelines, but you're going to have to work with it, test it out, trial and error, um, and find what works for you. And you will probably have to tweak it along the way. And so those are things that I have learned. I have a pretty good balance now, but there are times when things get off and I start over consuming one thing or the other and realize that I have to readjust. But now, at least I have an idea of how to readjust. Um, Next thing I've learned is always bring snacks. I don't care what they say is going to be served wherever I'm going. I always expect that there won't be something there that I will want to eat that will be vegan or plant-based in any way. Um, and I personally don't like to make a big deal out of it. I might ask if I feel comfortable, depending on where I'm going and who's there. But I always just bring a snack bar in my purse and have something with me that if I am hungry, then I can just eat my snack bar and have something to tide me over until I get to wherever I'm going, home or somewhere else, in order to get something to, actually eat. But always bring snacks. Never forget your snacks, or you will be hangry, or you will eat things that you maybe aren't good for you. Um, Being a planner, being just a person that plans things out is very helpful. And that is definitely my background and my personality. So I like to plan and I like to be organized. I love to have my app that tells me everything that I'm going to eat for the week, or like I said, or at least part of the week. Have it planned out, organized, um, prepped if I can. For the week, at least the ingredients, have them prepped and ready to go. So just at least having a rough plan is good. And that goes back to what I was talking about in episode 18. If you listen to that one, is decision fatigue is a real thing. And once you get to the end of your day, if you don't have things planned out and you aren't prepared and ready, then making decisions about food is really hard, and usually those are the days that I end up eating cereal, but then my macros get totally thrown off, and I don't feel happy, then. I feel, like, "Dang, I had an opportunity and, I blew it because I didn't have it planned." And sometimes I just have to give myself grace. But there's still a part of me that's like, if I would have just planned it like I know I should have, then I wouldn't have been eating cereal. I would have had a real meal right now. So, anyway, being a planner is very helpful. So, if you're a planner, you are one step ahead here. I have also learned that I know who I am, and I'm not here on this earth to please everybody else by eating their food. And I know it sounds kind of trivial and kind of silly, but some people are really, I don't know, they're really offended if you don't eat their food. And they take it as I don't know, it's like a human trait or something that, everything must revolve around food and everyone must eat the same way, the same things. And if you are outside of that box, you are therefore outside of the realm of people. I don't know, of the tribe. That's a good way to put it. So if you are not eating like the tribe, you are an outsider of the tribe. And I just don't get that. I don't understand it. Um, I, I I think people are individual, and everyone gets to make their own decisions. And I'm 49 years old, and I'm not going to make my lifestyle and health decisions based on making someone else happy. It, they're it just makes no sense to me. I can't even comprehend it, honestly. I don't get it. However, on the other hand, I'm not preachy either. So obviously, I'm on my podcast right now, so I get to preach a little bit here. But this is my environment. This is like being in my home and having a conversation with a friend in my home. This is different. If I'm out at someone's home and they have food or something, and I'm at an event, obviously I'm not going to preach to them about the food choices that they are making, but I do expect that them not to preach at me either. So if they have something that I don't want to eat and they offer me food, I simply say, "No, thank you. I'm good. I appreciate that. Oh, it looks wonderful. Thanks." And I'm going to be polite, but I'm also not going to eat it. So, but it's also not, and no dig on them either. I'm not going to say, you shouldn't eat that. That has a bunch of, fat and calories in it. What are you doing? That's just rude. And just, I mean, who does that? I should hope nobody here does that. Please don't do that. But if what I usually find though is somebody's got to make some sort of comment. And I'm pretty good about letting those roll off. Well, I'm very good about letting those roll off my back. I don't usually worry about it. Um, I don't know. Someone's always got to make a comment, and I just kind of blow it off. Um, and that's just, again, one of those lessons that you learn. You can't be offended and you can't take comments personally, because that goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning here, is that people take food personally. I don't know why. It's simply what we fuel our bodies with. I mean, at the very essence of it, food is simply the mechanics that help our bodies operate. And you can put food in it. Well, food is one of those things. As a human, we're really lucky because the other mammals on this earth are very limited. They're like the whales, they're eating fish, right? That's their source. Other animals, primates, they can eat bugs and meat, and they're closest to us, of course. So they can eat a number of things, but they're going to mainly eat plants. Um, Elephants, okay, I don't know why elephants just popped in my elephants are, they're eating plants and things like that. So their bodies are built, my point is that their bodies are built to process a certain source of food, and that is what they have to eat. If they put other things in their body is going to revolt and it is not going to function properly. The human body is magnificent. I mean, it's just absolutely magnificent machine, because we can function on things that have no food in them whatsoever, yet we call them food. Think Cheetos. Is there anything in that product that is actually real? I haven't seen a Cheetos label in a long time, but if it glows, it can't be real. So, but we call it food. But it's not food, it's just edible. So we can eat this and it will operate in our bodies and it will sustain certain functions, but it is not actually food. It is not what our bodies are meant to run on, but our bodies are such efficient machines that you can put things in it that don't belong there, and it will manage to pull out whatever it can from whatever you put in it, to and I think that is magnificent. I mean, that is amazing, sustainability and survivability function and capabilities that our bodies have and that humans have as humans, to be able to sustain life that way. I mean, we could probably eat, bark and paper and survive. So it's a very integral survival mechanism that our bodies have, and it's amazing. And I respect it, as you can tell. But I also don't want to eat like that on a daily basis, because I'm looking for optimal nutrition. What is going to help my body work at the optimal level for the longest period of time. Um, on that same token, perfectionism is a lie, absolute lie. And I don't strive to be perfect. I certainly don't claim to be perfect whatsoever. I am not perfect. I eat Oreos, but only on occasion. I love baked goods and I will eat those. Um, I eat cereal and bread and all sorts of other things. Um, I just got these graham crackers from Sprouts that are the most amazing graham crackers I have ever had in my life. I don't know where they've been in all my life. I've always had like just cardboard graham crackers, and I bought these Sprouts graham crackers, and they're like light and crispy, and they just sort of like melt in your mouth. I mean, the most amazing graham crackers I've ever had. So anyway, I eat graham crackers. So, um, So that's why I don't call myself whole food plant-based because I will eat some processed foods on occasion. But that's not perfection, right? I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm simply trying to work with what I've got within parameters of a healthy lifestyle. Um, and I think that it's important to be proud that that I am putting myself first, that I know that my health is important to me, that my optimal nutrition is important to me. And I think that if you're going through something like that too, you should be proud of yourself. It's not something to hide or be ashamed of or to, um, to apologize for. I've seen that many times. Um, you are taking care of yourself. If somebody offers you something that you don't want to eat, whether it's not plant-based, or you're just simply like, you know what, I had cake yesterday, I'm not going to have cake today, whatever your reason, if you turn something down, no one should pressure you to eat something that you don't want to or that you've already politely declined. um, you should be proud that you are putting yourself first and making those decisions that benefit you because nobody else is going to make those decisions for you except for you. And you need to be strong enough to know that you can make those decisions for yourself and to be okay with that. And others should respect that as well. And if they don't, that's not your problem, that's theirs. And that's so important for you to understand and to own and accept. So along the lines of perfectionism, I'm gonna get down off that high horse right now. Or that no, that soapbox. I wasn't on a high horse, I was on a soapbox. So I'm gonna step off the soapbox for a second. Um, and I will tell you that I not only eat kale, I also eat the Oreos. So it's balance, it's the right timing. I'm gonna go on a road trip this week, and I have a sleeve of Oreos that I will be able to eat, on the road trip, either on the road or when I get there or whatever. I got a sleeve of Oreos, and they're waiting for my road trip because I love myself some road trip Oreos. But I don't eat Oreos every day. I don't keep them in the house. Um, because I will probably eat them. So I keep them for special occasions and I, eat them on road trips. It's just what I do. But the kale I eat every day because the kale is how I sustain my health. And so I have learned that balance that I'm going to eat healthy 90% of the time, and 10% of the time, I'm going to have some treats. Sometimes those treats are whole food, sometimes they're not. So, um, but I give myself that. So I said I would tell you what the differences are between these different types of eating. Maybe I should have said this earlier. But so vegan is a lifestyle. And you may have heard this before. So if you have, bear with me. So vegan is not just food and how you eat and not eating animal products. Vegan is actually more of a full lifestyle. Oftentimes, people come to a vegan diet through animal rights and animal purposes. So they have seen the atrocities that occur in animal agriculture. They have, a sincere feelings for animals, and they don't like to see them harmed or for any purpose, let alone consumption and eating. So, veganism is really more movement, um, and it involves how a person eats. So that's a good way to think about vegan, which is why in this podcast I often use the word plant-based instead of vegan, because I don't talk about the animal rights side of things or the environmental side of things, which is also often incorporated in the vegan lifestyle. I came to my way of eating through health reasons, as I explained earlier. So the diet that I follow really considered plant-based, which means there are no animal products in my diet. Although honey is one of those that kind of some people consume, some people don't. I try to avoid it, but not in all ways. Like those graham crackers, they have honey in them. So I am not a vegan. I am plant-based. So I am okay with honey sometimes, but that's a personal choice of mine. Some people choose no honey whatsoever because they, kind of cross over into the animal rights as well. I think that's more of a personal choice. So plant-based, though, no animal products, which would mean no dairy, no eggs, no meat, no fish. But anything made of a plant is good to go. So, um, the other term that you'll hear a lot is it's shortened as an acronym WFPB, which is whole food plant based. Whole food plant based takes the plant based diet up a notch and it eliminates processed foods. So, most of so tofu is typically okay on a whole food plant-based diet, but that's about as processed as you get in whole food plant-based. You're really talking about the whole food in its original source, or as close to its original source as possible. So there may be an occasional processed thing, but most of the foods are in their whole form. Um, then there is vegetarianism, which I think is important to mention because that is often a question. Well, what's the difference between vegetarian and vegan? And by the way, you see this at restaurants and events all the time. A lot of people don't understand the difference between vegan and vegetarian. So vegetarian, there are a lot of different variations of vegetarian, but in a brief nutshell, without listing them all out, which, by the way, I have seen a grid of the different names for these different types of vegetarians. Um, but as a whole, a vegetarian will consume dairy, sometimes eggs, and occasionally they may have an occasional fish, but that's really more pescatarian than it is vegetarian. But sometimes they get lumped into the same group. But really, vegetarians will avoid meat products. So that would normally be any type of meat or fish or poultry. So they won't have fish, poultry, or any type of meat, but they may consume egg and dairy. So and like I said, there's a lot of different kinds of vegetarians. So if you are one and you're listening to this and you're saying, no, this is, the kind it is, I get that. I know that there's different variations. But really, what I talk about here on this podcast and when I coach nutrition, it's plant based. So there is uh, no animal products included in that. So I guess something that people I have heard people ask me before is, do I feel like I'm missing out? No. I feel like I'm missing out on nothing. I am 100% happy with the decision I made in 2017 and where I am now. It wasn't always easy because I can tell you in the beginning, it's weird because in the very beginning, I was like, what am I going to eat? Oh my God, there's nothing to eat. And then I realized I have everything to eat. I mean, I was limited before. Now I'm not limited at all. It's like my mind opened up and I realized I just wasn't being creative before. And now my creativity is just abundant because you have like only so many types of meat, right? You've got pork and beef, and then you got a couple other, you know, farm animal type foods that are pretty hard to find, right? So most of the time you got pork, beef, or chicken or fish. All right, that's like four things. So with vegetables, though, there is a wide variety of vegetables that you can do in a number of combinations. And, the variety, the things that you can make. I mean, you can make brownies out of sweet potatoes, you can make mousse out of avocado, and these things are absolutely wonderful. If you learn how to prepare them, then, your life has just opened up when it comes to, or I should say, your culinary life has opened up to a vast variety of food. You're no longer just limited by these couple of animal source proteins. I recently discovered a different type of tofu that's made with fava beans, and I love this tofu. It's firm, it stays together, it cuts really well. When I cook it in the pan, it doesn't like crumble apart. Um, there's hardly any fat, there's hardly any carbs. So I'm actually getting like as close to a pure protein source as I possibly can just by how it was packaged and processed. And I'm loving it. So if you find this tofu in your stores, I highly recommend it. It's fava bean tofu. It's wonderful. And it's just like tofu in that it soaks up all the flavors of whatever you marinated in or cook it with. So it works great. I love it. I don't know how well it would do as a scramble though, because it is very firm. Um, but for like putting in stir fries and things like that, perfect. Absolutely perfect. Um, so I have also discovered though that along the way, although I am plant-based and although I did go plant-based for my health, you can't help but realize along the way, because you know, when you listen to these talking heads and you listen to the doctors and you are looking for these plant-based education sources, you know, a lot of them talk about the plight of the animals and the environmental impact of animal agriculture and the detriment to our soil. And you just can't help but learn these things as you are looking into your own health. And so I definitely have had my eyes open to that, as I have, you know, gone down this journey for the last 7 years. And although I'm not going to be going to any rallies anytime soon, I feel good about my choices and that I have made those decisions and that I am not contributing through my actions and my diet to any of that. When I hear, you know, on the news about things happening, you know, outbreaks and disease and things at these facilities, you know, I'm grateful that I made the decision that I did so long ago to not be impacted personally by that. Now, obviously, I feel bad for the animals, but that's, you know, that's just my empathy. That's just who I am. And so it it's more in line with who I am, and I didn't even know that, growing up or in my early adult years before I changed my diet. I didn't even realize that those things mattered to me until I made the change, and then it became or I became more aware of those actions, and then I became more aware of how I feel about it and how I feel glad that I'm not participating in it. So those things can come with time. You may not start there, but you might realize that over time, your opinion on these things also change. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that that relationships are impacted. And this is another thing that I have learned. And it's how I think it's how you choose to work with that, um, in your relationships and how much effort you're willing to put in knowing that you have made a decision for yourself and for your health and that other people are in a different place. They haven't made those decisions maybe, and you might still be living in the same household with people who have other decisions, who eat a different way, who live a different lifestyle. And it doesn't have to be a detrimental impact on your relationship, but I do think you have to have conversations that are open and honest and respect each other, for your own decisions that each of you are making. But it certainly can have an impact. And I think that goes back to some of the comments that I have heard, you know, directed my way, not necessarily in my, you know, direct household, but just maybe extended family, extended friends, and things like that. And I just let it roll off my back and take it for, you know, what I've said the whole time. It's that fear. It's that human nature fear of the unknown, and you're different, and, different isn't good. Difference outside of the tribe. So, um, none of that is true, of course, but it's kind of that human nature thing that, I take as an observer. So, anyway, it's relationships are always complex, and I think a little outside the scope of the podcast, but but important to touch on and important to be aware of. And it's certainly one of those things that I have noticed, and and I think it was important to acknowledge that on my Veganniversary, because they are different. And different doesn't have to be bad, because a lot of times the changes that you make in your life, other people are watching. You might not realize that other people are watching. They might even make snide comments or offhanded comments and things like that. And then one day you meet up with them, you go out somewhere to lunch or something, and they order the vegan meal. So then now the tables have turned, and you must be careful about what you say, because you don't want to cause a problem either, by making comments about another person's food choices. So be aware, you know, um, and and know that your actions are seen by others, um, and you just keep doing you, and the rest will fall in place. So those are the lessons that I wanted to share today, on this anniversary episode. And I want to wish you a happy Veganniversary when your Veganniversary comes up. If you don't know when it is, that's okay. Just pick the month about where you decided to make a change, if you know when that was, and adopt it as your Veganniversary. But for me, it's August 1st. So, all right, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I will see you on the next one. We will be on episode number 20. And I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, have a fantastic rest of your week. And don't forget, run your best life on carbs. I'm Coach Val. This is Running on Carbs podcast, and I will see you next time. Take care.